Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me here and for launching the Suffice project with a focus on food security. I think this is, as you'll learn through the conversations today and some of the questions, the Suffice project is a research project about learning how to work well between academics and the nonprofit sector in these four given areas and learn some lessons that we can take more broadly from there. At the same time, we see Suffice as a platform for bringing voices forward from the nonprofit sector that I think have important things to share with the rest of us. And that's really, my comments are going to back that up a little bit. So the title of this panel is Putting Our Money Where Our Mouths Are, the Federal Budget and Food Insecurity. Given this title, I expect some of my co-panelists will be bringing forward detailed policy recommendations. So I've decided that rather than bring a list forward myself, and I started making a list and I kept holding myself back from bringing that forward today. That's because I want to talk in more general terms about policymaking in the spirit of a truly participatory and deliberative democratic process, one that I'd like to see strengthened here in Ottawa. There is, I believe, an urgent need to have a more inclusive conversation about these issues, one that gives a preferential voice to those most challenged by the issues at hand, including those on the lowest incomes in Canada, Aboriginal people, farmers and fishers, as well as the organizations that represent them these groups at the national level, such as Food Secure Canada and Inuit Tapirit Kanatami, among others. So taking this approach will also give me a chance to talk about the Suffice research project that we're launching today and how we see its role in strengthening democratic debate on a number of these key social issues. So the Suffice, as a research project, is about learning how to best undertake respectful and productive partnerships between the academic sector, and that's colleges and universities as they engage in teaching and research, and the NGO community working on social and environmental issues, so that we can work together to build a stronger and more resilient Canada. In my case, I'm the co-lead of the Community Food Security Hub of the Suffice project with Kathleen Mean of Just Food Ottawa and Food Secure Canada. So to build, our goal is, so community food security, I just want to give some context for what we're talking about today, is widely defined as a condition, and this is a direct quote, in which all community members obtain a safe, culturally appropriate, nutritionally sound diet through an economically and environmentally sustainable food system that maximizes community self-resilience, community self-reliance, social justice, and democratic decision-making. A couple things to point out there is thus community food security is not just about the household level income-related food insecurity, but about the wider food system and how well it's meeting the needs both for people being fed and an environmentally sustainable food system that also incorporates these principles of self-reliance, social justice, and democratic decision-making. So our hub is working to enhance community food security at the local level across Canada by building more and stronger working relationships between academics, especially those associated with the Canadian Association for Food Studies. So this is a key partner organization in the hub, and Food Secure Canada and its many member organizations. So these are two key partners. Our goal is to increase the collaboration between members of these two organizations so that each side can benefit from the insights and contributions of the other. We would also like to see in particular that more academics take their lead on defining their own research directions by listening to the needs of community organizations who work on the front lines. This fits with the mandate of the whole project, which is to put community first. That's the CF in our Suffice title. Since too often relationships between academics and organizations have been, I've been trying to find the right word, and I chose parasitical rather than collaborative. So that's what Suffice as a whole is about. Today's panel is about taking the spirit of academic and NGO collaboration into the realm of food policy and the federal budget in particular. So my thought is to highlight just a little bit what academics can contribute to the discussion, but then to put the focus, drawing on my own field of political science and democratic theory, on why it is important to broaden policy deliberations on these topics in Canada, to give a preferential position to voices like those of FSC and ITK. So let me just bring forward a few examples of the work of academics associated with the Canadian Association for Food Studies, whose insights I think need to be listened to by the federal government as it seeks to address food insecurity in this country. So the first example I'll bring forward is the work of Patty Williams at Mount St. Vincent University and her extensive team of community partners and academics across Nova Scotia. She's a part of the Suffice Community Food Security Hub, and her work, I think, is quite important. In a recent edition of Canadian Journal of Public Health, the fact that Nova Scotians dependent on income assistance they've documented the fact that Nova Scotians dependent on income assistance would face significant monthly deficits if they chose a nutritious diet based on the federal government's own guidelines, which is the National Nutritious Food Basket. Those of you working in this field know this is not a big surprise, but it just shows the disconnect between the federal guidance and what's happening on the ground. Moreover, despite incremental increases in income assistance rates over the last 10 years, the potential deficit has increased significantly between 2002 and 2010. This research effectively puts an end to any claim that people living in poverty would be able to enjoy the right to food if they just made better choices with their money. And their research is Nova Scotia focused specifically, but similar research, quantitative research, has taken place across the country. Another example I want to bring forward, Rod McRae from New York University and a past chair of the Canadian Association for Food Studies, who's a key partner in our hub, has long studied the Canadian food, trade, agriculture, and health policy domains. We don't have a food policy department, right? We don't have a food act in Canada. We don't have a national food policy. Instead, we have all these disparate policies undertaken by different departments with different aims that there are efforts to try and integrate, there are interdepartmental committees, but it's still not cohesive in the way that Rod, through many years of analysis and advice, has been trying to push. In a recent contribution to the Journal of Hunger and Environmental Nutrition, he offered detailed recommendations on how these departments can work more productively together to further sustainable agriculture, health, and poverty reduction at the same time. Finally, the numerous publications of Val Tarasic at University of Toronto in public health and nutrition journals point out that the tools typically thought to support community food security, things like food banks, community gardens, all of the community-based initiatives that are out there, while important for some, and they really are important, don't get at the nub of the issue, which is that food insecurity is an income-related issue, closely tied with housing, and that strategies to address income-related food insecurity must include revisiting social assistance rates and minimum wages. And here we get right into, what's the role of the federal government and the role of the provinces. I'm definitely one of these people who thinks that the federal government can take a leadership role on a national food strategy in this country. But like I said, I wasn't going to get into my list. These are research-based insights that need to be included in federal policy deliberations. On the other hand, I can also point to equally strong insights from the community side, all from people associated with our other main partner organization in the CFS Hub, which is Food Secure Canada. For example, in February of 2012, Paul Slump of the National Farmers Union, which is a member organization of Food Secure Canada, gave a presentation to the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade on the proposed comprehensive and high-level economic partnership agreement with Japan. He pointed out that past trade agreements have had many systematic negative impacts for family farmers in Canada, to the primary benefit of large transnational corporations, so that Ottawa's energies would be better directed towards developing a national food policy first before pursuing yet another round of trade negotiations. Similarly, in May of 2010, Kathleen Gibson, representing the BC Food Systems Network, which is another member of Food Secure Canada and one of the organizations that we're working with in our first round of projects in the Community Food Security Hub, she gave a presentation to the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food on the red meat supply chain, pointing out that so many of the regulatory interventions of recent decades have systematically harmed smaller meat producers at the expense of larger ones. She then outlined practical strategies for addressing this situation in Canada. So all of these little snippets of kind of research that's happening across Canada and the community-based work that's coming through Food Secure Canada, they're all meant to show that this is the kind of experience that we're trying to bring together in the Suffice project. And I challenge you to think about how community-based organizations that are working closely with researchers to get good empirical evidence to support some of their arguments, and likewise academic researchers that are really working to pursue the needs and interests of community organizations, the power that we can have over the coming years in this project in bringing these two sides together to advocate for sustainable, just, and a healthy food system in Canada. In order to get there, this sustainable, just, and healthy food system in Canada, however, there's an important issue that needs to be addressed here in Ottawa. And this is what I would want to focus on the rest of my comments on today. The issue I'm referring to is a mindset that places ideology above evidence and that systematically discourages real democratic deliberation. I won't name names, but suffice it to say that we've seen a lot of this mindset in recent years in Ottawa. What would I like to see in its place? That's simple. It's known as democratic deliberation. By this, I'm referring to the core idea that I teach in my politics courses, which is that democracy really means that all those who are to be affected by a decision should have a role in making that decision. Imagine how things might look in this country if those who might be most affected by a decision would have a chance to really engage in the making of that decision. What I'm talking about here is not just representational democracy, where we vote for someone representing a party who then comes to Ottawa to toe the party line. Rather, theories of deliberative democracy suggest processes for making decisions that are inclusive of all of the perspectives of key stakeholders or groups that will be affected. Further, in my classes, I point out, drawing on Habermas and Eckersley and all these theorists that I don't have to talk about today, that truly deliberative democratic decision-making can only take place when those who are part of the debate enter with a willingness to change their minds based on what they hear from others around the table. This means a willingness to listen to both evidence and experience before forming an opinion, not just paying attention to party ideologues who themselves may only be tuned into opinion polls and the party's financial backers. Policy making based in true deliberation and inclusive of the voices of those to be most affected by decisions also gives a privileged position to organizations representing the marginalized in our society. It's only through actively including and listening to what Val Plumwood calls the voices from below that the best, and here the argument is it's the most rational, the most democratic, and the most long-range, far-sighted decisions are made from the point of view of deliberate democratic theory. I should note that the idea of voices from below is not meant in any derogatory sense, but rather as a way to characterize those individuals and communities most distanced from decisions made at the heart of a state's apparatus. In the case of food policy discussions, deliberative democratic theory encourages state to provide funding and other types of supports, much like intervening funding in court cases, to ensure that the most marginalized of our society and or their spokespeople, and that's where organizations like FSC and ITK both come in, are actively brought into policy deliberations, including a role in decision making. And I probably don't need to tell you that we've seen some cutting of this kind of funding in recent years and in recent budgets in Ottawa, and I think it's a real problem that the key Aboriginal organizations here in Ottawa that are the voices of a lot of these marginalized groups are losing their ability to bring those perspectives forward, which is partly why we have chosen to make sure those voices are heard today. While we are certainly far from seeing a truly deliberative democracy in Canada right now, I'm proud to be part of a project that is based on values that have a lot in common with deliberate democratic theory. A project that places community first and that says we need to give a priority position to voices like that of FSC and ITK in Canada's food policy discussions. So with that, I'll conclude my comments, and I'm really excited to hear what the next three panelists have to say. Thank you.